I'm Natalie Wilmot. I'm the Deputy Dean of the School of Management, and I'm delighted to be hosting this Women in Marketing webinar this morning with my colleague, Professor Eva Kipnis. We have a panel of three wonderful speakers who we will introduce shortly. Just to let you all know, the format of this session will be that we'll have around an hour for our panel discussion, which will be moderated by myself and Eva. And following that, we'll have approximately 25 to 30 minutes for a question and answer with the audience. So do make a note of any questions as we're going through the conversation. There will be time to get to those. On behalf of the School of Management at the University of Bradford, I'm really delighted that we're hosting this event with Women in Marketing. As many of you know, inclusion, diversity are really core values for the University of Bradford and the School of Management. And we're currently celebrating our 60th anniversary year as a school. And I think this is a wonderful way to start some of those celebrations by working with Women in Marketing to host this conversation about leadership today. So without further ado, I will hand over to Professor Kipnis, who will explain a bit more about what Women in Marketing do and introduce our speakers.
Thank you, Natalie, and good morning, everybody, or good afternoon, good day, depends on the time zone you're in. I am delighted to welcome...
It's annoying, Emma. I'll just close my little window. It might drown it out a little bit. Yeah,
Sana, I think you need to mute your mic. Thank you. So I'm delighted to introduce our speakers today, who are representing a wonderful organization we all are honored to be part in, Women in Marketing. And Women in Marketing is a social enterprise with a global reach, as can be told by the locations each of us are in. And Women in Marketing's core essence is about elevating and supporting women, but also male allies who also do a lot of work to advance equality and diversity in marketing industry, but also the outcomes for consumers. Women in Marketing has been founded in 2004. So it has a long history of work in our industry, and it also evolved through its partnerships. It established Women in Marketing Awards in 2010, which has now been running for over a decade. Several of us have been privileged to be winners of the awards at one point or another, and I'm sure our speakers will talk about it a little bit more later on. So we are delighted to welcome the wonderful panel that we have, and I will begin by introducing Karolina Maniak, who is the Integrated Marketing Experience Manager at 3M. She's based in Poland, and she's also the winner of the One to Watch Women in Marketing Award of 2022. Karolina leads an international team of experienced marketing professionals and also works in best practice and growth of a business group across Europe, Middle East and Africa. So quite a bit on her plate. Alice Yu Yibo is the founder and president of Mama on Palette, and also a team lead in a partnership and industry marketing at NCIS Group. And she's part of Women in Marketing Global Advisory Council. Alice is based in Singapore, and she had pioneered in NCIS a first diversity inclusion event for women in IT. And she also founded Mama on Palette, which is the first community in Singapore for mothers who love art. Finally, Henry Windrich is Director for Media and Content at MasterCard, and also Women in Marketing Advisory Council member. Henry is based in Dubai, and he was based in London prior to that, heading up brand and content marketing for media giants such as Global, Hearst, and ITV. In an interesting fact, Henry also completed a PhD in American foreign policy at UCL in London prior to becoming marketeer. So welcome, everybody. Thank you very much once again for being here. We are delighted to have you. So I suppose the first opening question, can each of you briefly talk about what sparked your interest in marketing and your career journey? How did it evolve? Maybe Carolina can start.
I can start, yeah, thank you. Okay, so I think, it's actually a little bit of an accident, to be honest. And I think this is what is fascinating about life, because, if you stay open, you never know what happens to you. I was originally studying psychology, that was my major, and that's where I was kind of starting my career aspirations from. But then I met the people, and I think the people is the factor in everybody's lives, which is the critical one, steering us in somewhere, where we wouldn't have even thought we were going to go. And I started to get engaged in ISEC projects, and that got me really in driving, initiatives in student empowerment across different countries in the world. I began to realize, the marketing is really a great power. It's a wonderful tool that can help a lot of good things. If you use it well, you can create the win-win. And I think this is what got me interested enough to remain in that domain for so many years now. So yeah, it started by an accident, really starting working with ISEC from my psychology background, and then completely flipping it around to, be fully on with marketing head. So yes, that is my story, and I'm pretty happy with all that happened, actually. And it's a good learning as well, to stay open, I think.
Thank you. And Henry, how did you transition from a PhD in an unrelated field into...
Yeah, it was a very odd. I sort of got halfway through my PhD, and I mean, a PhD can be quite lonely, can't it? Because it's a lot of time with yourself in libraries or traveling for research. And I sort of realized that I didn't necessarily want to be an academic, but I didn't quite know what I wanted to do. So I was sort of 25, 26 and a bit confused. And I had all my friends were on their second or third jobs at this point, having left university at at a normal time. So I started applying for jobs, sort of anything. And that's obviously always a bit of a disaster if you don't have a focus. And I kind of ended up doing the only thing that I knew how to do to get into the world of television, which I decided that I wanted to be in. I didn't know what this thing called media was then. I was too innocent. I liked television. I want to be in television. And I started actually doing a night university degree. I did an MA in television history and practice. I was good at the academics, and then because it came with a work placement in the third term. And I've always said it's a bit like sliding doors, because that work placement could have been at the British Film Institute, it could have been in many other departments or different companies, but mine happened to be in the marketing department at ITV. And again, being a bit innocent, I didn't realize quite how prestigious it was to get into marketing and in a big entertainment company. So I was there for 2 weeks, and they happened to be looking for a PA to the marketing director. So that's where I said I would love to apply for that. And the marketing director was like, but you're too academic. And I was like, I will do anything to get through the door. I just want to get inside. And that's how I began. So I began as the PA to the marketing director, and now I am a marketing director. So I think it's sort of, and then following the path from there. And I think very similar to Carolina, once you get into marketing, the people are really interesting. The people are really engaged. You're thinking about audiences. You're thinking about routes to market. You're stretched creatively, media choices. The whole thing is it's an enjoyable workplace to be. I've never woken up and thought, oh, I don't want to go to work. I've been stressed, but I've always wanted to do the job. And I think that's a great place to be.
Thank you. And I can understand also, because this was something that I always enjoyed. I've spent over 10 years in the industry myself. The versatility of marketing, no day is ever the same. You're always doing
it's very
something
broad.
else. So it's very rewarding. Thank you. And Alice, what about you?
Yeah, hi everyone. So I hear that Carolina's career in marketing starts with an accident, a beautiful accident, and for Henry, it's maybe more about exploration. And for me, it's actually a lot about experimentation. And I tell you why, because I am a chemistry student. I was actually recruited to pursue a chemistry degree under a full-time scholarship. I was originally from mainland China, if you have been there. So I was very dedicated to pursue science for my major and for my career. But just like Henry along the way, I realized, maybe laboratory wasn't something ready for me. I mean, I can play with the flask and all the equipment, but they are not really something that give me a punch in the heart. So I started with experimentation, carrying a scientist attitude. So I thought maybe I would just try an internship every summer holiday or every winter holiday to see what I dislike, so I can strike them off my list and find out what I might be like or suitable for. So over the 4 years of university, I kind of did about 10 internships and part-time jobs. There are some in marketing, some in sales, some in research. And at the end of my university, I guess, I get very clearly what I dislike, which is I don't want to stay in the lab and do my reports. I don't like doing, research work. Just I like to engage with people, like Henry said. I like communications. I like creative stuff. So that triggers me to reject a PhD offer in chemistry and pursue marketing boldly.
How interesting. And I love how you also categorized kind of the different routes very aptly, that indeed it is accident, experiment. And what was the third word that you used to describe Henry's career path?
I think for him, exploration.
Exploration. It's really nice.
Wonderful. Well, I guess this is what we marketeers do. We also find very interesting labels to describe people's experiences. So thank you very much. Well, I want to build on the first question, but maybe now talk about where you are in your careers now. You're all very successful leaders working for large organizations. It's a challenging landscape to be in at the moment, particularly. And I'm wondering, what do you think are the key challenges for marketing managers, for chief marketing officers? And what, in your view, are the key tips you can give to deal with these challenges and to address them? And perhaps we can go in a slightly different order, and I'll suggest Henry to start, and then we will come to Alice and then Carolina.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah, it is a very difficult landscape. I think the speed of evolution in marketing has, I mean, like most industries, it's just sped up exponentially. 6 months ago we all talked about algorithms, and now with that we've retermed it AI, and then on top of AI you've got generative AI, and it just keeps getting faster and faster. So I think if you're at the very senior end, the CMO side of things, and you're at the very top of an organization, for me, it's about investing in your people, because fundamentally that's what's going to make the biggest difference to your organization. You can invest in all the technology that you need, that will always be there, and you can drive that forward, but you have to have a great group around you who are focused on your brand and bringing that technology to life and use for your brand. So that for me is where it's about the people. From a sort of in the middle of your career point, that sort of marketing manager, maybe marketing director side, where you're still, have operational requirements as well. For me, I think there's a sense of you can't just rely on budget anymore. We used to, you could throw money at things for a long time because the world economy shot up. Then we had the 2008 crash and marketing budgets also got cut very dramatically. But I would say for the past 5, 6, 7 years, those budgets came back quite exponentially, and people you can spend your way through it. If you need, you're in crisis, you could throw money at the wall. I think again, the headwinds that are being experienced globally means that budgets are either tightened or being cut. So it's for me, it's about the creativity and innovation that's required to think smartly about how you use the money that you've got. And that's something, I mean, at MasterCard, I think we do a great job in terms of being a fantastic brand, but actually our budgets aren't massive compared to some of our competitors. So it's all about how do you be smarter with what you've got, and I'm a great believer in building the brand of whatever company you're at. So it's a lot easier to rely on a long established brand or build one that really means something to people than just trying to, you know, buy more ads on Meta or engaging with yet another influencer. I think you have to believe and build your own brand.
Thank you, Henry. Alice, over to you.
I think it's very well said by Henry. I was taking notes. And I think, you know, this is, I would say, a good habit for marketing managers to continuously advance themselves, is to keep an attitude for lifelong learning, because the technology and the practices in marketing has always been evolving, and you can't really just rely on experience or what you have from the books to stay relevant in your field. So it's really important to understand, regardless whether you work in a small company or big company, to always open your eyes towards what's happening not only inside the organization but also outside. Learn not just from the books or courses, but also try to find opportunities to practice, or you know, just like Henry said, to innovate. So for me, my play field is my nonprofit organizations that I founded 6 years ago. Is a society focusing on mothers' mental health and mothers who love art. So because this is my own baby and something I started on my own, the great thing is I can practice marketing ideas or new things with you know, minimum level of approvals or minimum budget, but still try something new and crazy about it and see whether it works. So I do encourage marketers, regardless of your level, to be open-minded, to always learn, and also to find maybe a side project to test and learn ideas from there.
Thank you. And Carolina?
Yeah, this is really lots of very valuable insight, I think. And looking at this, you know, we have that element of, you know, how you know, leverage your potential that you have with your people and an organization, how you know, kind of expand your own. And then I think with all this, one thing that I want to add to that is staying focused. Because I think, you know, in that world, there is so many different opportunities that it's very easy to just kind of try and do everything. And what happens, you know, when you do that is that nothing really gets done very well. And I think this is one of our biggest challenges, because I think in the marketing domain, we are all kind of creative spirits. You know, we want to experiment, we want to try things, we want to, you know, kind of go, you know, check different ways of doing things. And in the current environment where there is just so many opportunities, it's critical that we, you know, exercise the power of focus. And then with that, we manage expectations, because of course, you know, we are all kind of grounded in some sort of a company culture. We are all kind of grounded in some sort of, you know, the structural setup that we work with. And then we have to be realistic as well in terms of, you know, what works, what doesn't, you know, so that we kind of don't try to push the organization somewhere where it's really not capable to go. And I think, you know, I want to bring that little bit of realism also in that, you know, respect of what is important, because that kind of provides the balance to make sure that, you know, we have an approach that can be successful, not only experimental, but also successful. The strategy is only as good as its execution.
Thank you,
Yeah,
Carolina.
I totally agree with that. I think there's something very interesting about how it doesn't matter how senior you get, there's always someone else to sign off the work. So it's so no matter what you want to try or how you can push and you can push. And I've learned, and I think anyone who works in a big corporate, and I've worked in small private and small independently owned as well, whether it was a private owner of that company or somewhere like MasterCard, most times it's about incremental change. It's not about one big foul giant swoop. It's about incrementally changing and nudging people in the right direction. I really believe that.
Absolutely.
Thank you very much. We actually came into our next area of discussion very nicely. And while I have Carolina, I just want to stay with you for a second, because in addition to leading the integrated marketing work, you are also currently leading a team through a big organizational transformation. So sometimes they do come, I guess. And I think the additional aspect of it is that you're doing it fully remotely, working in an international organization, so also working cross-culturally. Can you talk a little bit about what kind of leadership qualities are required for this? And then building on this, we will come to Henry and Alice as well to talk more broadly about what are the if you like, your top 3 qualities of a successful marketing leader today and also in the future.
Of course, yeah. And thank you. You know, it is definitely a very, very interesting time for me personally. I grow every day with that because I think change, nothing can teach you like change. I think this is something where you really kind of have to get to the bottom of what it really means, you know, to lead, what it really means to you know, be aligned and to prioritize as well. Choosing the directions and all of that, you know, is quite, yeah, critical, you know, to remain clear. Yeah. And I think before I go into, you know, the qualities themselves, I would like to say that I strongly believe getting this right requires understanding your organizational context. And I think, you know, I would really argue there is no one set of qualities, you know, that will fit every single environment. And I think that is critical to realize, because oftentimes we see companies fail because they try, you know, implement something that worked somewhere else very well, but failing to understand the impact of the company existing culture, structure, and, you know, the ways of doing things, you know, that exist. So, you know, in my case, you know, what I believe could be maybe more universal and applicable to everybody is that authenticity element of leadership. And acknowledging maybe that there is no such thing like being a perfect leader, you know. So I think that element of almost being humble and raw is very helpful to keep the connection with the people as we go through the process together. Yeah, so I think, you know, that is probably one of the most important things, which probably is also universal to a really big extent. Yeah, that authenticity. Then the other thing is also empathy. And I think, you know, especially in times of change, the empathetic leadership is really powerful, because we have to appreciate the fact that, you know, whatever team it is, everybody is gonna experience change in a slightly different way, because we talk about personal differences, you know, people's kind of cultural backgrounds, yeah, and all of that coming together, it requires a lot of understanding from a leader, and being really careful not to make assumptions, you know, about what we think is happening, you know. So I think to kind of elaborate on that, you know, it is you know, really critical to be aware of the biases. And I think it's not maybe a quality, but it's more of a knowledge or awareness thing that I want to put as a third thing. Be aware of your personal biases. It is a world of discovery, especially, you know, in a mediated communication background, when we have limited bodily cues when we talk with the people. We have only so much to get by, you know, to understand what is actually happening. Awareness of your own way of thinking and doing things will be tremendously helpful. So to give some examples to finish with, you know, if we talk about biases, things like, you know, confirmation bias. So the things that, you know, we would like to basically confirm what we already believe. You know, if we come with a predetermined mindset to a conversation, very unlikely something worthwhile will happen there. So, you know, that is critical for success, you know, to really kind of go through all of these. There are different sorts of biases, you know, to go through. Be aware of them and be mindful wherever you go, especially in the mediated communication environment where the cues you operate on are very limited.
Thank you. Thank you very much. Alice, Henry, do you have things you could or you wish to add to what Carolina was saying?
Harry, you go first.
Oh, thank you. Yes, sure. Yeah, I think it's a really tough ask when you have companies going through moments of huge transformation, because so I was at Discovery Group, so Discovery Channel, Animal Planet, those were big real TV channels, when we merged with Warner Brothers. And that was a brutal 2 year, well, it's still going on. I've moved to MasterCard because I thought I'm probably next in this brutal process. But the reality is that you realize when you're managing moments of transformation is you have to be as open and communicative with your team as possible. And I was running a team from Dubai that were based everywhere from South Africa to the UK to Poland to across Europe, in the marketing leads. And it was incredibly stressful because actually one side of my job became about 60% of it became about HR. You're just kind of trying to manage that process, and you aren't really doing marketing anymore. On the other hand, the business hasn't stopped, so you do still need to be driving the marketing output, and also trying to keep your team members upbeat when they're all, including yourself, often living in a bit of fear. Because until you get to the end of a transformational period, you don't really know if your name's next on the list. And the brutal reality is that I used to, when I was younger, I think like many, I see this a lot in younger colleagues, you believe that HR is on your side, and then you realize as you get older that HR is only on the company side. That's why they exist, right? To protect the company fundamentally. So when a transformational process is happening, and you're on the HR side of things and you're working with them, you realize how sometimes how little what you have achieved or done really matters to the company. So much of it is actually about where you are on the P&L. How much do you cost? Where are you based? You know, and I found that a disheartening process to realize what the corporate world can be like. Now, at the end of it, you have to come out of it feeling like you have led that moment as truthfully and as honestly and as I think, with to Caroline's point, with as much EQ as you possibly can, because although you are pretty much swept along by this process, you have to be able to look yourself in the mirror in the morning and say, I'm going to look after these people and manage their, whether they're staying or leaving, manage that moment as gracefully as possible. And that is about being open in your communication. I would also say I think it's fantastic that we can all do these things across Teams and Zoom, and and we're all running teams. And I know Ava, you were saying about you've got colleagues in Dubai, etc. But fundamentally, I think it's harder to do because you can't have that moment with people. And I do think that lack of body language, you can just put a bit of a face on the screen. So I do think that empathy piece in what can be really tough times, and actually the people who are left behind are often feeling as broken by the process, even though they got through it. So yeah, I think that EQ and that communication piece is very true, and fundamentally change is the only constant. So I always think wherever I go, the same will happen again. I mean, it's part of corporate life.
Thank you. Alice?
Yeah, I would totally agree on the communications part, and maybe I could just share a very interesting story that happened in one of my previous companies. So I used to prior to NCS Group. So now I'm in B2B tech, but previously I was in B2C in the financial services industry at Prudential Insurance. So one of the projects that I was given was to implement a content sharing platform for our 3,000 financial consultants in Singapore. And the reason being, COVID hit Singapore, and our monetary authority in Singapore, basically they are the government authority in charge of all the financial institutions' behaviors. And they said, all your insurance agents are always on the road selling insurance to strangers, and they cannot do that anymore. So you need to train them to appropriately sell them through social media and through digital platforms. And as insurance agents being insurance agents, they will post a lot of exaggerated stuff on social. Oh, I own a BMW, I have a big house. And that's just further give people the image of how not trustworthy they are, and nobody will buy the insurance. So now after COVID hit, they are the agents who can no longer do roadshows are getting more anxious. So we sort of the idea of giving them a social media hub whereby we can create materials. You know, if you're not so into social media, you can use these ready-made templates to share on your social media. And we will also, you know, give you customizable templates for you to use, and even seasonal greetings and so many even memes and all that. But at the first of implementing the project, the insurance agents, especially the more experienced ones, were very reluctant to move on to the platform, because that means they will need to spend extra time to download the app, and also to learn something new. It just adds extra tasks on their timetable. So it's a transformation for both marketing and for sales, and in terms of our collaboration. But in the end, how we solve the problem is, first, we did a lot of in-person, online sharing sessions, and we created a very entertaining experience for those insurance agents to learn about the new tool, so they feel, oh, it's actually easy to use, it's not as hard as I think, and plus it will give me benefits to know how to use social media. And secondly, we actually build an internal influence group, and we call them finfluencers, stand for financial influencers. And these are the younger folks who are really good at social media, and they really leverage the power of social media to sell their products and become the top FCs. So we actually leverage this group of voices to promote the app for us, and they will share their wisdom. They will organize. We even organized a Clubhouse session when Clubhouse was popular at that time, to keep creating buzz and positive vibes about this transformational app. And in the end, we actually exceeded the target of onboarding half of the FCs. Actually, we have 80% of the salespeople using the app, and they have a weekly active rate of 50%, which is quite good. So I guess this experience taught us that you need to be creative with your approach, and also at the first there are always miscommunications, there are always misunderstandings, and there are always reluctance, but stay confident and stay curious, understand why they don't want to do this, why they don't want to transform, and use innovative ways to transform them, or transform ways.
Thank you so much.
Oh, sorry, if you don't mind, I just had a thought in my mind because I was listening to what my predecessors were saying, and I couldn't help but think, that we all kind of know, that almost 70% of change initiatives fail, and basically one of the most common reasons is ignoring your internal customer. And I think, I really like the example we just listened to, because, it kind of shows that the power of really listening to the people that you work with and then implementing your solution. And I think this is the critical element. And to what you were also sharing earlier, Henry, about, mergers, this is probably the most complicated what can happen, because we typically get two culture kind of clashing onto one another. And I think it's fascinating how, even though, we have all of this knowledge, and theoretical frameworks available to work with, that somehow companies still would struggle, to really take benefit from the information that we have. And I think it kind of maybe has to do something with being used to working in certain ways and relying a lot of, business instincts, and not tapping maybe into these frameworks that we know of right now. Yeah, but very, very interesting, the example that we've heard.
Thank you. I was also thinking about what Alice was saying in terms of the internal influence group. I was thinking, actually, it's a really interesting way of, so my work in diversity and inclusion, I often come across the employee resource groups, but I was thinking, actually, it's an interesting way of also utilizing a similar approach when managing transformation and change. So thank you very much for sharing it. So I wanted to bring us a little bit back to the fact that we are having a conversation with all of you, this fascinating conversation, as a conversation with women in marketing. And I wanted to ask you, obviously, first of all, thank you for your contribution. We all contribute as volunteers into this fabulous organization. So thank you for all your work on top of your day job. How did you become involved, and why do you support women leaders? Why do you think it is an important aspect of what you do?
So let me begin. I will start. So I think my story with this respect is very similar to my story with marketing in general. It's the people I met. Again, I have had tremendous luck to meet a lot of very inspirational women, throughout my career and before it even started. And I think they really made me think, and they made me inspired to how we can become better collectively. That it doesn't have to be also individualistic. We live in that culture of, me, the me culture. Okay. And I think looking at it from a different perspective and almost having a tangible example of how this collaborative effort where everybody can benefit from, sharing and inspiration actually brings much better results, and not even results, but also it makes people feel better. So that's where I come from. And, having met these women, I started to think, how can I do something, since I benefited so much? So that's where I landed with, organizing various personal leadership sessions, mentorings and whatnot, because I'm just trying to also add my contribution, as I believe that the only way that we can really make a change is to just do it a step at a time. And every one little brick that somebody contributes is going to help to build the culture. So that's my motivation, if you will.
Thank you.
So just to echo with that, coincidentally, yesterday I was in the afternoon session with the former Singapore president. I'm not sure if you heard of this lady. She's the first female president in Singapore. Her name is Halima Yaakob. So she's recently stepped down from the presidency, and we have a new president. But yesterday was a farewell for her, and she was sharing during the afternoon tea that I remember this line very, very clearly. She said, you see, the work for women and diversity is always a working in progress. And she pointed out that, might we be seeing the progress of having more empowerment for women in various industries, especially my industry in technology, might be moving slowly and is not super encouraging, but as long as we're working, right, there always be some progress. So I fully agree with Carolina that I think each one of us, we can make some small changes and small progress, and all this work when combined together will make a bigger impact. And I think another personal reason for me to be involved in women in marketing is I realize although there are a lot of females who are working in marketing, but we can actually create a greater impact and transformation in marketing. So example, I remember many years ago, I was interviewing for a marketing internship. And on my way back, I took this cab, and this taxi driver was very warm. He just asked me, "Hey, little girl, where did you go just now?" I said, "Oh, I went for an interview for a marketing internship." He said, "Oh, that's very suitable for girls. You're gonna draw and design and create colorful brochures." I was like, okay, but there are more things about marketing. It's a science. It's more than just design beautiful stuff, and it's suitable for girls, not just because girls can do beautiful stuff. So I guess that's maybe you guys can get what I mean. I just want to break this stereotype about marketing itself, about why women should be working in marketing, and the whole the diversity and inclusion scene in our industry overall. And again, it's always a work in progress.
It's very interesting how you talk about the perception, the dated perception of marketing as being a women's only kind of profession. So on that note, I guess, I don't know, Henry, did you ever come across these perceptions? And also, I guess you would have a very different kind of perspective, I assume, in terms of supporting women in marketing
yeah, and my journey into meeting Ade was quite prosaic. I was on the Marketing Academy in the UK, which is sort of a scholarship program for they do once a year for about 30 people. And someone who graduated from that was like, "Oh, I'm on the Women in Marketing board, and we need a room to do our judging in. Does anyone have any rooms available at their offices?" And I said, "We've got them at Global in Leicester Square." And that's how Ade was like, "Oh, that's so nice of you. Let's have a catch up." So I learned about it because obviously I wasn't, or I guess not eligible to be nominated for an award or wouldn't have been on that radar. So I began in a very practical way of supplying a need. And then Ade and I really hit it off. And what I found so interesting about this is I've always worked with majority women. I think I find that so at MasterCard we're I think in this region, so Eastern Europe, Middle East, Africa, I think we're over 70% female, which is fantastic. In fact, my boss is seen as an outlier because he's got like 2 men in his team, and everyone's like, "Whoa, that's a lot." You're crazy. So the big boss, she is a woman, Bea, who's astonishing. And then similarly at my other companies, the marketing leads were predominantly female, and certainly my colleagues were as well. But I think there is a genuine, and you see this in PR as well a lot, there's a real glass ceiling of lots of women doing incredibly well, doing brilliant jobs, and then you suddenly get to that point and you're like, but why is the big boss male? And it's very rare that you find, or I think it's very rare in my experience, to find a CMO who is female. And I really struggle with that. And I mean, it suits me. I mean, great, fab, gives me more of a chance to get to the CMO part. But it just seems so bizarre that the best leaders I've had have been women. Some of the best people I work with are women. And yet somehow the glass ceiling, I really think, still exists. And I find that uncomfortable. And I think you need organizations like Women in Marketing because the battle is not over. Fine. I think, and obviously you guys have actual experience as opposed to my perception of it. I think women in most big organizations are treated equally. I think I think there is a sense, but I don't know. There's something goes wrong somewhere in my mind. So, and I get the maternity thing maybe, but so many women don't have children, so it can't just be about maternity. Like there's something there that seems to stop organizations from putting women at the very top. And I hope that something like Women in Marketing as a group can help drive that past that barrier. Am I speaking out of turn? I think that exists. Am I right in saying that?
I actually wanted to kind of build on what you just shared, and I wanna say maybe a bit controversial, but I think there is also an element of what we women have to do differently, because it's almost that element of feeling like I can do this. I am worthy to do this. I am well equipped to do this. We are really tough on ourselves. We tend to be. And I think that tremendously contributes to this disparity that we are seeing. It's not only the organizational part, but it's also the part that we actually can control. And that's why, things like, I am remarkable workshops from Google and other things like that are so critical. So just to kind of add on it, because I think we do have a role to play that we can actually play,
Totally.
from
And I
our
always find it astonishing how often there might be a next level up role, and so many of my female colleagues would be like, "Oh, I don't know if I should apply for that," and
Exactly.
every man 2 levels below is applying for it.
Exactly.
So there is that. I think that does still exist a lot, doesn't it?
It does. Well,
they're so much better than anyone
nominated.
else who's applying.
Well, thank you so much. And I guess it is a very good point to hand over to Natalie. But just for our audience, Ade is the CEO and the founder of Women in Marketing, just so that everybody knows.
Oh yes, sorry,
who
that
we're
makes
talking about.
important to know that.
Over to you, Natalie.
Thank you. And I think that discussion that we've just had really leads me in very nicely to my next questions. We've obviously heard a lot about your experience in marketing, but I'd like to just broaden our conversation about women in leadership more generally. I think there are multiple studies that have demonstrated exactly what you've just all said about the fact that women tend not to apply for promotion opportunities unless they feel they clearly meet every single one of the criteria, whereas men tend to apply for the opportunities if they meet 50%. So really my question for you now is, what do you think organisations can do to support the future of diverse leadership and really encourage more women to take on these leadership roles and indeed apply for these leadership roles, perhaps in the first place?
I find something very interesting about what you just said about what the organizations can do, because at MasterCard, there's a full commitment to inclusion and diversity. I've never experienced anything like it. And I feel like I've been in very big global corporates who are all very liberal, but MasterCard has a real thing about it. And I think that makes a huge difference, because I was just thinking, whilst our CMO is male, surprise, every single leader apart from one is female on his team. So all the EVPs across the globe and in the global roles or in the regional roles are all women. And I think, and then they are obviously very comfortable as well when they hire. So I do think how a corporation approaches this and actively encourages and promotes, for me, it's not just about the encouraging, it's about actually doing, holding it to task and actually doing those promotions. I think it makes a huge difference, because I've seen too often when companies, there's a lot of lip service, isn't there, so often.
Oh, absolutely. And I love what you just said, about walking the talk. This is the difficult part. It's easy to talk about it. It's much more difficult to really do it. And, what I can say, I'm actually very proud of my employer, because, when we look at, the balance, I do have several female VPs, which is, already great, and we used to have a female CMO as well, and so I think, it's also giving the message, yes, that it is within your reach, because there is a woman there, so if she could do that, why you can't? And I think, and I love that notion of really demonstrating it, in real life. And maybe to also add to it, what I also like from other companies I've mentioned before, and I want to kind of tap on it a bit more, the Google example and how they have run their I Am Remarkable initiative. This is perfect, because this is addressing the other side of the story. Okay, other than showcasing that you can, and kind of giving people some sort of a point of reference to go to, there's also the element of training and empowering people, and I think organizations absolutely are in position, to do that, providing workshops, providing expertise and education, to help people realize what stops them. So that is that other element, right? So one is walking the talk, and the other one is really to giving the tools to the people so that they can help themselves, if that makes sense.
I always believe the influence comes from the top. You might disagree. Some people think when the bottom people do something like a protest or whatever together, that they will be able to influence the company's culture. And I'm sure everybody heard of this quote, culture eats strategy for breakfast. But personally, and also out of my experience working in Asia and different companies here, I always find the top management still have a very determining and heavy weightage in terms of influencing the power, so influencing the culture. So if you if you're interviewing in a company, do study for, the CEO's profiles, the VP of People and Culture or VP of HR, whether they are advocates for diversity and inclusion. And that's very important because sometimes even when middle management, they want to push forward something, but without a strong advocacy from the upper management, it's still hard to really realize it. Sometimes it becomes superficial work. So I think when choosing a job, it's important to see, whether the company overall has a culture that empowers women.
Thank you. I think some really helpful insights there, and I completely agree with everything that you say about the need for top management support, but to really ensure that companies are walking the walk and not just paying lip service to diversity and inclusion. I'd like to bring the conversation back a little bit to thinking about your own careers as well now. So it was really fascinating to hear about how all of you kind of entered into marketing as a discipline. But thinking more broadly about leadership, if you were to look back at your own experiences of becoming a leader and knowing what you now know at this stage in your careers, what advice would you want to give to your younger self at the start of their career in marketing?
I could go first. So when I was younger, and I think when I now look at my younger team members and interns, I saw this similar pattern about chase for labels. So and now with social media marketing or personal branding, a lot of them want to be associated with something, with some labels, and there's nothing wrong about it. But I would always say that your focus shouldn't be just on the labels. Your focus should be on really pursue what you are really suitable for and what you are happy with and passionate about. So I think that would be something that I give to my younger self, and I always tell my younger team members, instead of just say, oh, I claimed the women in marketing. Of course, it's a good label, but it's the work and it's the growth journey that you have behind the scene before you even achieve that label that matters, that will really fuel your personal development.
Yeah, I will say that I absolutely love what you said there, because I think we all kind of, yeah, especially again, I'm going to refer to the context of the world we live in. Yeah, it's like, quick information. Okay, you're this, you're that, and thank you. Next, So, and I think it creates that impression that this is enough. Yeah, that this is what you're actually after, and I love what you just said there. That what really matters, what really constitutes us, is the journey. And I think this is maybe what I'm going to add to from my experience as well. Don't be so tough on yourself. I think this is what I wanted would like to say to my previous self, like several years back. Like we don't have to be perfect, and we don't have to get it right every time, because the real value is in learning, is in the process. I think it's very much aligned to what was just shared. But it's also that element of just acknowledging that, I think, to ourselves, that it is a process, and it will be a process. And if we are so fixated at getting always the 100% of everything, there is very little we can learn from the process, because it's the detours that bring the most value and increase the depth of the knowledge that we can create.
Yeah, and I would just like to add that actually, when I look back, a lot of the learnings and steep curve of growth come from failure. So I totally agree that, instead of chasing for perfection, maybe chase for that chance for learning.
Yeah, and I think for me, I find it astonishing when you meet someone who is a bad people leader, because you're almost choosing to be a bad people leader, because fundamentally it's a skill set that you can learn. It's not instinctive. It's a bit like being a parent. You wouldn't go into it without maybe having attended like a couple of classes or read a book. Whereas so many people get given people to manage, and they've never done any effort themselves to actually work out, well, how do you manage, and what's my management style? I felt very lucky because I did this marketing academy course that is or this scholarship program that is about developing leadership. So it was all around that. And this was when I was a marketing manager. I had one person reporting into me. My next role at a different company, I had 8, and then suddenly there was like 16. And then the one at Discovery, when I was doing the book from Dubai, there were like 65 people who laddered up into me. And if I hadn't, and the continual learning that I think we've all talked about, it's a really tough and big skill set. And for me, if you take the time and effort to actually learn how to be a people leader, because there's a huge amount of work on this. I mean, it's not like we're all sort of like, there's no one's done any work or there are no books about it. But it's a real thing. It's a hard thing to do. And nothing is more frustrating to me. Like, look across an organization and I see someone who's never either been given the training by their organization or has gone and looked into it themselves, maybe even not realizing that it exists, to still see them flounder, their team flounder, and they all seem very miserable. And I think when you see someone who's actually taken the time and effort, you can see a team that suddenly unites. And when you suddenly get this sense of like, oh, that team over there is doing a really great job. And it almost always becomes from having a great leader. And that leader is usually someone, who's actually gone and studied it and made an effort to learn how to be good at it. It's a skill set.
Thank you. I think some really interesting points there, and I absolutely agree with what you say, Henry. I think naturally, as somebody in my position in a business school, it always really fascinates me how people are put into leadership positions by organisations without having had any kind of training or support to help them manage that. So I do think it is
and they can often then go through to become very senior leaders, but still have no leadership skills.
Absolutely. And I think, Alice, you raised a really important point there, and I am mindful of time. So I'm going to ask one final question so that we do have opportunities for the audience to ask questions as well. But you mentioned about the importance of failure as a learning experience in your leadership journey. So I wonder if I could ask you all if you could give, in general terms, really a time where something didn't work out for you, but what you actually took from that in terms of your own learning and development along that journey. So I think if I can come to you first, Alice, as you brought the point up.
I have plenty to share.
I was just thinking the same thing. I was like, it's an endless failure, isn't it?
That's right. I have the habit of keeping like a diary, so I will shamelessly just write down all the things that happens at work and what I have learned from it. And usually I put the notebooks on my shelf. And when I just looking at my bookshelf, I have probably 4 or 5 notebooks there documenting what I have learned in the past experience. But I guess a most recent one is working with Gen Z colleagues. So I thought I understand them, but in the end, it didn't turn out to be the way I want. So I think when it comes to management, just having empathy is not enough. Really, like Henry said, it's a science. It's a subject that you really need to invest your efforts in. So for me, I always just for my recent case, I guess I give too much flexibility. So thinking they will appreciate it because they are Gen Zs. I thought they like to be creative. They like to have their own space. But it turns to be Gen Zs also vary from each other. And just happens the younger team member that I have, he actually appreciates more handhold. He actually appreciates more micromanagement rather than letting him go. So I think, adequate communications and be transparent, be honest with each other is very important. And maybe he didn't get, the intention behind the letting go behavior from me. And I also didn't know that he actually wants more guidance from his manager. And in the end, I guess learned from this failure of managing this Gen Z stuff, I decided to write a book about how to work with Gen Zs and what are the career challenges that Gen Zs actually face and which are sometimes deviate from the common beliefs about Gen Z. Then in the end, I developed a book about it. It's called 10 common myths that Gen Z face in their career, and the overall title is called Before the Good Things Come. So I guess the book title applies to me as well. There's a lot of things and a lot of failures one have to experience before the good things come, before you become a good and a better manager.
Thank you. I think that was a really helpful example there. Henry, if I can come to you next, you mentioned you were thinking about a few examples, so is there one you'd like to share?
Well, I was thinking there's been lots of times when like a campaign hasn't worked or a branding didn't go through, didn't get approved, or there's lots of like academic failures, so to speak, within work. But I was thinking the ones that really stuck with me, and I thought it was interesting that Alice was saying the same thing, is when I feel like I've let someone down on my team. I think that's when I haven't maybe recognized they're struggling, or they haven't felt like they can talk to me because whatever the reason might be, maybe I was too busy trying to get the branding approved for that campaign or whatever it might be. And those are the things that stick with me as like, I really wish I'd done more or had noticed or done a better job. Fundamentally, it's the people, not the work, if that makes sense. The work is the work, and any big organization now is always like, yeah, no, we can all learn from failures. I'm like, well, that's just, that's not true, but B, the fundamentals are, I don't worry about those because they're fairly infrequent and they don't usually end. We're not performing surgery, as we always say, but when it's people, and sometimes you can't always help either. You're a bit like, sometimes someone's just lost their faith or interest or love of a company, and they just want to leave, and you can't stop that from happening. But those are the ones that stick with me, and the ones I wish I could change.
Thank you. And Carolina, how about you?
Yeah, I think both what Alice and Henry said kind of resonates with me as well, and I think that looking at my past experience, also the ones that really hurt, the ones that stay are those mistakes which are related to people. And I remember when I was really starting the journey, and that was like probably one of the biggest learnings of my life. I was just really fresh into all of this, and I was running this team for the first time. It was a NGO set up at that point in time, so it's a whole other way of managing people. And I did a very big mistake of kind of implementing my very high expectations onto the team, and I was unrealistic, in terms of what we can do, in that setup. I was very passionate and driven, and I wanted to get it really right, and the effect was the opposite, and it really stick with me. It's been many years now, but I always remember that one because it really was very difficult to recover from this mistake, and I think it teaches us that we really have to be mindful. And also what you said, Henry, that leadership is a skill set, and we have to practice. Yeah, it's almost like it comes with practice, but it also comes with knowledge, and being able to understand the situation. I think really helps to do a better assessment and to do a better job eventually. Yeah, so people, absolutely, people mistakes hurt the most, but yeah, let's learn from them, I guess, and take it to a better level every time.
Thank you. I think that's a really good point on which to open it up to the audience questions now. So thank you so much for the, I think, real insight that you've given to the questions that Eva and I have asked. And it's certainly been food for thought for me as well, really thinking about leadership in particular. I'm sure that the audience have got questions as well. So I think this is an appropriate point for us to open the floor. If you would like to ask a question from the audience, if you could raise your hand so that Eva and I can see who's asking the question, or alternatively, if you prefer to type in the chat box, then we'll keep an eye on that and read those out if you're not in a situation where you can turn your microphone on at the moment. So over to you all.
And while everybody is thinking about their questions, I wouldn't be a marketeer if I didn't do a plug-in and just say, the conversation is so fascinating. Unfortunately, we are limited by time. So should you wish to discover more, I've popped a few links here, so feel free to take a photo of the screen. And just to encourage everybody who, if you are in marketing, do consider submitting a nomination for Women in Marketing Awards. This year, the deadline is quite tight, but you still have 10 days. We have the deadline of 10th of October. To our students, enjoy celebrating with us our birthday. It's going to be a fantastic year full of wonderful events. And I also wanted to thank Women in Marketing overall for many contributions this week, because I was also very fortunate to talk to another Women in Marketing contributor, Nicola Kemp, which you can find on our Responsible Management podcast. And now over to the questions. So while we are waiting for questions, may I ask a question? So I guess it's the question to everyone here. I heard somebody recently talking about their experiences in marketing, and also how they would give their key advice to their younger self about advocate for yourself. And I thought, okay, this is a great piece of advice, but how do you actually do this? So in your understanding, what does advocating for yourself, especially when you're a junior, what does that mean? What could it look like?
Maybe I can start with some thoughts here. So I think there's a couple of layers, and I would really start from kind of yourself as a person. So first of all, you need to become your best cheerleader. Like, you should be the one who is always the last to leave, when it comes to cheering for your own success. And I think obviously it has to be, in balance with realism in terms of, learning from failure. But nevertheless, yes, you really should be the last one to leave, when it comes to cheering for your own success. And then the other thing is leveraging and tapping into your network. So first creating the network and then leveraging the network. And I think when you are really early in your career days, it's really worthwhile to look at, kind of the 3-person system. I sometimes say, you should have a coach, you should have a mentor, and you should have a sponsor. And it can be one person, it can be many people. But look for a coach, look for a mentor, look for a sponsor. And the difference is that, it is, somebody who to help you kind of evolve in your everyday job. That would be the coach. Somebody to help to help you kind of understand your bigger picture and kind of inspire you to go forward would be the mentor. And then the sponsor is the person who's going to be in the closed room with the closed doors advocating for you when you're not there. And I think this is really important, because it is actually something which you can play a role with, looking for these people proactively, identifying somebody you can trust and you fire, or you feel inspired by, and you want to just learn from them. Don't hesitate to approach. It may seem scary, kind of just going to somebody and being like, oh, I'm really inspired by what you're doing. Would you mind, I don't know, devoting half an hour of your time every other week or once a month or just once, Don't hesitate. Most of the people are really approachable. That would be my advice.
I totally agree. And I think at a younger age, to have someone at the position that you want to become in the future, to associate with, or just have a tea and listen to how she talks and how she think about things, will really inspire you to, maybe think out of your existing routine. And another thing I want to mention is when we advocate for ourselves, personally, the kind of 5 a.m. club thing to encourage myself every morning doesn't really work. So I think advocacy for yourself is important, but advocate for yourself with a context. So you might be wondering, now I am junior, I don't have much working experience. How do I advocate for myself with a context? And I think the context is something you can create for yourself even outside of work. What you can do is volunteering. So I have been working with some younger people. They might be the president of their student club, or they join some volunteer activities, or they're just super good at networking. They go to events and end up knowing a lot of senior peoples, and this gives them the insights and the confidence, and even train them in their behaviors, and they no longer talk like juniors because they learned through their observations. So I think you can create a context to advocate for yourself through many ways, even not at your work, if you're not at the level of it.
Thank you. It's so useful to think about it in this way. And I guess coming back to what we do in universities and how we support our students, I guess all the career support services and the internship opportunities and the different practice sessions that we create would be those context creating environments and situations that I would encourage everybody to consider. And Henry, what would you add to this?
Yeah, I agree with all of the advice, but it can also be really difficult, right? Because there are a limited number of roles, and it's a bun fight. There's a huge number of people applying for so many things. So I try and encourage lateral moves as much as moving upwards, because I think I did it going from a PhD to being like a PA, like that worked for me. I've moved industries sideways, and I've gone up. I've never actually managed to successfully go up within an organization yet. I've always gone up by moving organizations. And I see people who get very fixated, especially again when you're a bit more junior, maybe a bit more hopeful. You're a bit like, life is so easy and breezy, this is all going to happen for me. And I'm a bit like, you're getting too fixated on trying to get into, I don't know, LVMH, or you want to go and work for a specific brand or whatever it might be. You want to be in this very specific area. So say it's brand marketing as opposed to, say, media relations or whatever it might be. I'm a little bit like, try and just get yourself into a part of that organization or into that world. It's a lot easier to move around and meet people when you've just got your foot in the door. So I'm a very big advocate for that. I don't believe in just trying to aim for this one thing. That happens to a couple of people. I'm always a bit jealous when I see them like superstar rocket past me and they're all absolutely fabulous, but it's not the reality for 99% of us. So actually it's all about, where can I go to be in the right orbit of where I would like to be eventually.
I totally agree with that. And I think thinking back about my own career, it's the same lateral move applies, because I graduated as a no PhD and no relationship to humanities major. I was a chemistry graduate, and it was super difficult to land a marketing job, even though with the internship experience and all. So I guess I need I had to take a zigzag approach to get into marketing, starting as a management associate, so basically rotating across different functions, and that didn't really work out. I was expecting I could end up with the marketing rotation, but they are full of headcounts, so I have to move into the agency side, and before into my first account side, client side work in a startup, and then gradually moving into bigger companies. I'm not saying bigger companies are the best for marketers, but if you want to experience different types of marketing jobs, I agree. I'm the same as Henry. I never succeeded in moving up in one organization, or maybe I lose the patience, wait for the cadence.
I was literally about to say that, Alice. I think people I see be successful in big organizations are also ones who are there 10, 15, 30 years. I mean, so for the big boss I was talking about earlier, who's the EVP now for Europe, she began 32 years ago at MasterCard as the PA in the Rome office. So you can do it, but I think you have got to be really willing to wait. I think the jumps so often come by moving organizations or moving agency to client side and back and forth. I totally agree with that.
And I just wanted to add, sorry, that I think this discussion also shows that there is no one recipe for
Yeah,
success, you know.
100%.
And I think, you know, it's almost like, okay, this is your toolbox. Now work with it. You know, like you can go this way, you can go that way. And I think probably from all that we all shared, the one common denominator is flexibility. You know, like you need to be flexible, you need to adapt depending on where you are, where you want to go. And assess, you know, what is the best road to get there. And I really like the point about, you know, really don't not getting fixated on a particular element, because then we kind of lose sight of the bigger picture, which is, yeah, very, very detrimental in consequences.
I think it's also, again, just thinking back to my experience, I mean, I went from being in industry, so I did the opposite route to yours, Henry. I went from being in industry into academia. And I guess one thing, I was prepared for it, but still kind of psychologically it takes a little bit of adjustment, is as you grow in one career, you understand yourself with a certain status at that point. And once you move into a different industry and a different career path, it's just this readjustment. And what you were talking about, kind of doing a PhD and then doing a PA's job. And I went from being a managing director to a PhD student. So again, it's kind of managing this change of yourself, I guess, is.
I've always said chase the career, not the salary. Now, that doesn't work for everyone. Lots of people would like to just get into like whatever the industry is and earn lots and lots of money. But I think if you're in a more of a passion-led career, which I think something like academia or marketing, you're never going to earn the really big bucks. So you might as well be in the part of that industry that you really like being in. As a, you know, so for me, I've always been chase the career, don't chase the money.
Thank you. There is something in the chat. Oh, thank you, Dave. You elaborated on how to access the podcast. Natalie, was it you who were putting your hand up?
I was checking if anybody else had raised their hand, and I managed to raise my own in the process.
Well, if there aren't any questions, and do feel free to post your questions later to us. If for MBA students in the room particularly, you will see me later in the year and a few of us who were in this call. So thank you very much for being here.